Throughout history, there have been many events that have shaped and reshaped our world, some which have brought mankind together, and others which have torn it apart. However, in some unusual situations, people you likely wouldn't expect took a stand against their superiors and made decisions that called the bluff on situations that otherwise would have reshaped our world entirely. And this video was made to take a look into those individuals. The first man is Vasily Arkhipov. Arkhipov's life began on January 30th, 1926, when he was born into a peasant family in the Russian town of Staraya Kapovana. Vasily would eventually enter the Pacific Higher Naval School before enlisting into the Soviet-Japan War on a minesweeping vessel in 1945, followed soon after by a transfer to the Azerbaijan Higher Naval School, where he would graduate in 1947. And almost immediately upon his graduation, Arkhipov entered service into the Soviet submarine service, which is where this story begins. Following the United States quarantine of Cuba, the Soviets subsequently departed 4 Foxtrot-class submarines from Kola Bay into the waters near Cuba, including Arkhipov's now significant B-59 submarine. However, as the sub entered the red zone near to Cuba, they went dark, quickly becoming too deep to receive any radio communications from Moscow or the United States, which is the same time that 11 US destroyers and the US aircraft carrier, the USS Randolph, intercepted the submarine and began dropping signaling depth charges in an attempt to have the submarine surface for questioning. However, unbeknownst to the US Navy and their crew was the payload aboard the B-59, a 10-kiloton nuclear torpedo that only required onboard verification to launch. And being surrounded and bombarded with depth charges prompted the B-59's crew to believe they were under attack and that a war had already begun. This situation, paired with no communications, no air conditioning, and breathing recycled air, caused the crew to grow anxious, nearly leading October 27th, 1962, to become the kickstarter for the world's largest war. But what prevented that from happening? One key aspect of the new Foxtrot submarine was that it required 3 instead of the common 2 officers to launch a warhead, and the other was the demeanor of Vasily Arkhipov. During the event, 2 of the officers, including the submarine's captain, Valentin Savitsky, wanted to launch the warhead, believing that a war had already started. However, Arkhipov refused, believing that the depth charges were in fact only deployed to signal the submarine to surface and not an attack on the vessel. With Vasily's refusal, the submarine was left with only one option: to surface, which ultimately proved Arkhipov's beliefs true and ultimately prevented a mass catastrophe and what would have been the catalyst for the next World War. Following the encounter, the B-59 would return to the Soviets, and ultimately, probably for good reason, the actions of the B-59 were not widely reported, including those of Vasily. In conclusion for his actions, however, Vasily would be rewarded the Future of Life Award in 2017, despite his passing in 1998. However, as the title and thumbnail implies, this was not the only occasion in which world catastrophe was narrowly avoided. The following example also occurred from the Soviet Union on the 26th of December, 1983. It was on this day that Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov trusted his instincts and ultimately single-handedly avoided an all-out arms battle. But who is he, and what happened to him on this day? Stanislav was born on the 7th of September, 1939, into a family close to Vladivostok and began his military career at the Kiev Military Aviation Engineering Academy, where he would graduate in 1972, then proceeding to join the Soviet Defense Force, working with new early warning systems that could detect nuclear missile launches targeting the country, which is precisely where this story begins. During a routine shift on September 26, 1983, the Oka early warning systems began to go ballistic, warning Stanislav with probable certainty that a total of 5 nuclear Minuteman warheads were inbound towards the nation from the United States, which instantly put Stanislav into a dilemma of 2 choices: trust his instinct that the system was reporting a false alarm due to a number of discrepancies within the perceived inbound threat, going against Soviet protocol and risking a charge of treason, or report the ICBMs to his CO, and inevitably catalyst a new world war, as there would be no time to verify the launches and certainly no time to negotiate. Ultimately, Stanislav sided with his instinct and did not report the incoming threats to his CO, which now, quite obviously, was the right choice. and the choice that saved an unbelievable amount of life. However, then, it was one that resulted in mixed emotions from Soviet officials, with Stanislav receiving an immense interrogation, amongst some appreciation. In the end, the threats were concluded to be sun rays bouncing off clouds. Stanislav, however, much later would receive a number of praises, such as the Dresden Peace Prize, the Future of Life Award, and several others, including his documentary, The Man Who Saved the World. And that is the history of the two men who, through their own judgment, saved millions. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting your thoughts, and subscribing for future videos.